I think a lot of people have already written off Jiaoqiu as a bad or a skippable unit without really understanding what he can bring to the table. So in this video, we'll be going over what he even does in the first place, and then later I'll show you some damage calculations to see how strong he really can be. Firstly, his basic attack. Same as always, deals fire damage equal to 100% of his attack. For his skill, he does damage to 3 enemies, but the primary target has a 100% base chance of being inflicted with Ashen Roast. So what does Ashen Roast do? At 1 stack, it increases the damage received by enemies by 15%. Then, the subsequent stack increases it by 5%, and it caps out at a total of 5 stacks, so a maximum of 35%. By the way, when they phrase it as damage received by enemies, this is actually vulnerability and not a damage boost. If you'd like to know more about vulnerability, I have a video on it comparing it to defense reduction, so you can watch that if you'd like to know more. But basically, it's a separate multiplier in the damage calculation, and due to how the math works, this is far better than just increasing your damage boost by the same amount, which is also the reason why Jiaoqiu can allow characters like Acheron to do more damage than with Pela. Other than this, his talent also allows his basic attack, his skill, and his ultimate to have a 100% base chance of inflicting Ashen Roast. And since his skill already has a chance of inflicting Ashen Roast, using his skill actually can give you 2 stacks on the primary and 1 stack on the adjacent targets. And the last part about his talent is that when enemies have Ashen Roast, they are also considered to be burned and will take 180% of his attack as a damage over time or DOT anytime the enemies take action. For your information, 180% attack for DOT is on the low side, but that's perfectly normal since Jiaoqiu's main mechanic is giving enemies vulnerability. For example, Queen Iphone has 280% attack DOT but only 21% vulnerability. Finally, his ultimate. Jiaoqiu basically cooks his enemies, dealing some fire damage and creates a zone. This zone is quite similar to say Ranmei's ultimate or Luocha's field, where he lasts for a certain number of turns, in this case 3, and when the field is up, it does some stuff. For Jiaoqiu, it increases the ultimate vulnerability of enemies by 15%. On top of that, there is a 60% base chance whenever an enemy takes action to be inflicted with Ashen Roast. And yes, this does give Acheron Crimson Knot stacks. The downside is that it can only give you a maximum of 6 stacks. I think a lot of people might be unhappy with this, but I think it's quite fair and a bit more balanced because otherwise in like pure fiction, your Acheron might actually use her ultimate like 2 to 3 times in a row. Thankfully, the maximum cap is reset every time Jiaoqiu uses his ultimate, so if his ultimate is still up but you just use it again, you can get the 6 stacks again. So if you look at this kid without his ultimate, at maximum stacks he will increase your team's damage on a similar level to Pela. The thing is, it can be quite hard to get to the maximum 5 stacks because you can only get 2 stacks on one target each time you use your skill. That's where his ultimate comes in, helping him to stack to 5 very easily, and also to help Acheron stack her ultimate very quickly. Furthermore, with Seared Scent, when enemies enter the zone created by his ultimate, they will immediately be applied the maximum number of stacks that any enemy unit has. So if there's only one boss, like in Pure Fiction with 5 stacks, and a new wave comes in, they all instantly get 5 stacks, which obviously is extremely useful because you don't have to stack it up from 0 again. Whereas for say Pela, if you use her ultimate and then Acheron's ultimate to clear the current wave, the next wave would obviously not have Pela's ultimate applied to them, and Pela would need at least 2 turns to get it back up. The other downside to Pela is that she doesn't do quite a lot of damage herself, like I already said, and honestly that's completely fine because her ultimate is very useful. Jiaoqiu, however, does get a huge, and I seriously mean absolutely crazy amount of attack percentage. For every 15% over 80% effective rate, Jiaoqiu gets 60% attack up to a maximum of 240% attack. 240%. For me, using Eyes of the Prey, my theoretical Jiaoqiu build has like 4700 attack. Much higher than even most damage dealers. Actually, probably higher than all of them. However, his DOT is on the low side and most of his multipliers are quite low as well, meaning he doesn't really convert his high attack to damage as efficiently as other damage dealers, but will still give you a moderate, decent amount of damage. On average, it can deal about 9 to 12,000 damage, higher in a DOT team, which isn't a lot, but it can add up against enemies that are very fast. For example, the complete version of Cocolia has like 190 speed. Yeah, it can definitely add up over a fight, but if you're trying to zero cycle or whatever, then this damage is quite negligible, obviously. And his last bonus ability is Pyro Cleanse. I don't know how to pronounce that. And he regenerates 15 energy for Jiaoqiu at the start of the battle. Honestly, this bonus ability is quite bad, but what it allows you to do is to get a 1-turn ultimate at the start of the battle, just like Pela. Jiaoqiu has a lower than average energy cost of 100, and so starts Memory of Chaos battles or whatever at 50 energy. This skill gives 30 energy, but you are running energy regeneration rate rope, meaning it will give around 35 energy instead. And so 15 plus 35 gives you a nice 50 energy for his ultimate, allowing Jiaoqiu to use his skill and ultimate on the first turn. After his first turn, he will take around 2 to 3 turns to get his ultimate back up, which is slower than Pela, but it's still quite convenient because his ultimate lasts for 3 turns, which in turn means Jiaoqiu's ultimate will pretty much have 100% uptime. Jiaoqiu's technique is kind of like Robin's or Jingliu's. He creates a dimension, and when you start the battle with that dimension, there is a 100% base chance to apply Ash and Roast immediately. It's useful, but really not anything crazy. So anyways, as a summary of Jiaoqiu's kit, he's kind of like a very comfy or convenient debuffer. Just plop your ultimate down and enemies get debuffed. If they die and the next wave comes in, they're still debuffed. Also, there are very few sources of vulnerability in the first place, which will also increase Jiaoqiu's value. So anyways, onto the juicy, the meaty part of the video, the damage estimation. I'm mostly comparing for Acheron teams because I believe Jiaoqiu will be Acheron's best support by far, and also because I was so hyped for Acheron and I made a massive Google sheet during the release, so it's kind of easy to just reuse that. So back to the Google Sheets, as you can see, this is my old Acheron sheet that I did a lot of simulations on. But anyways, there are two ways I want to compare Jiaoqiu and Pela. The first is for the same number of actions. And as I've written right here, it doesn't happen, because Jiaoqiu will give Acheron more stacks than Pela. Anyways, for E2S1 Acheron with Jiaoqiu, I'm considering it at 4 stacks. One skill does 84,000 damage from Acheron, and one ultimate does 1.1 million. Whereas if you use the exact same comp, but with Pela, it is 88,000 for a skill, and 930,000 for one ultimate, and the difference is 194,000 or 19%. If it's just the ultimate, it is actually 199, almost 200,000. So what if we add Sparkle's ultimate and Jiaoqiu's vulnerability is stacked to the maximum? Then we have this one instead. It's 103,000 for a skill, 1.2 million for one ultimate, and for Pela it is 104,000 for a skill and 1.06 million for an ultimate. The difference is now 224,000, but it is still roughly 19% difference. And again, the ultimate difference is about 225,000. So this may kind of paint Jiaoqiu in a bad light. Like, you may be thinking, oh, Jiaoqiu only does 19% more damage than with a Pela in an Acheron team. But like I said earlier, that is not true at all, because Jiaoqiu not only provides more damage in a single use of an ultimate, but he also gives more stacks to Acheron than Pela could ever. So anyways, since I already had E2 Pela simulations, what I found previously at 650 action value, it is 6.1 million damage or 6.2 million damage rounded up. And this is my base 100%. If I were to account for Jiaoqiu's increased stacks, it is actually 9.8 million damage. So yeah, it's almost 4 million damage over the Pela team. The thing is, at 650 action value, Jiaoqiu actually gives Acheron almost 3 ultimates over Pela. So right here, I'm calculating as 2 ultimates over Pela. And when you consider that each ultimate that Acheron does with Jiaoqiu, it also does more damage than Pela, it really adds up. So if I were to add one more ultimate, because in this simulation, I am not considering Trend of the Universal Market, nor am I considering enemies that can debuff each other, because, you know, some enemies can do that. And if you were to account for that, so I would give Jiaoqiu's team one more ultimate, it would actually be an 80% increase over the Pela team. So basically what this means, it's not that Jiaoqiu is always going to be 59% better or it's always going to be 80% better. It will obviously vary a lot in game, but the longer that you go, the bigger the difference between Jiaoqiu and Pela will get. And like I said earlier, because I'm not considering other debuffs like maybe a Venturine's ultimate, Trend of the Universal Market, or even debuffs that enemies can give to each other, these numbers should actually be higher. But even if this increases, the percentage increase should stay relatively the same. But that doesn't mean that a Jiaoqiu team is always going to be 59% better than the Pela team. Because even if the percentage stays relatively the same, the raw increase or the raw difference between these two teams will increase. And it's very important to take note of both the raw numbers and the percentage, because if you only have one or the other, it will not paint the full picture. If I say it's only 59% better than Pela, to some people it may not seem a lot, myself included. But if you look at the raw numbers, it is a 4 million increase, or almost 4 million. And you know, you can clear most stages with 4 million damage by itself, and that's only the difference. And one last thing to consider is that in pure fiction, Pela's ultimate may not be applied at all in some cases because she takes 2 turns to ult. So if you clear a wave very quickly after using Pela's ultimate, the next wave obviously will not have Pela's ultimate applied to them, so they will have the normal defense. They will not have their defense reduced, and that would mean that Pela's team damage will drop even lower, and this percentage increase can go up to 170, 180 even, and obviously this one can go up to 200 plus as well. But this is only for Acheron. Let's now talk about other teams that Pela can be used in to gauge if Jiaoqiu will be good outside of Acheron teams. Due to her kit, Pela is extremely versatile and can be used in so many different teams. Foothill, Jingliu, Duty, Break, and so on. Because 15% of Jiaoqiu's vulnerability only affects ultimate damage, Jiaoqiu's increase over Pela in comms outside of damage dealers dependent on their ultimate will not be much higher because it's only 35% vulnerability as compared to Pela's 40+ % defense reduction. In that case, it is definitely true that Jiaoqiu is only a small upgrade, except maybe in pure fiction because Jiaoqiu will have higher uptime. But in Memory of Chaos or Apocalyptic Shadow, where enemies have tons of HP, it is a lot easier to maintain Pela's ultimate uptime because the enemies are not going to die as quickly as they do in pure fiction. And because of this, it is very hard to argue in favor of Jiaoqiu over Pela, especially since he's a limited 5-star unit that you could potentially use 140+ pulls on. So considering that Jiaoqiu is quite literally the lord and savior for Acheron teams, but teams outside of Acheron and Argenti don't really need saving, I think it's quite hard to argue that you should be pulling for Jiaoqiu unless you have an Acheron or Argenti team. Even if you do use Acheron, you may already clear Memory of Chaos 12 with 3 stars, and you don't quite need more upgrades for the team, and he probably will not be worth your pulls either unless you want to keep using Acheron for the future. Then you know, he will help you to sustain through power creep and stuff like that. But if you really like Acheron and want to keep investing into a team, Jiaoqiu is the answer. Not only does he help Acheron do more damage for each attack, he helps Acheron get her ultimate back faster, which is the most important part. Even at E1 Acheron and below, which I didn't calculate, you can use both Pela and Jiaoqiu, which is actually very strong because you can get both defense reduction and vulnerability. But if you don't quite like Acheron, or you don't have her, or you like to play many different teams, it's probably better for you to save for other units. Obviously, Jiaoqiu can be used in DOT teams as well, but if they ever release a future Harmony unit that's kind of like Ranmei or Robin for DOT, it would be a bit tough for Jiaoqiu. I mean, it's already quite hard to compete with both of them right now, which means even though Jiaoqiu can be used in a lot of teams, it's only really the best support for Acheron teams and maybe Argenti teams. For everyone else, you can still use Pela, Ranmei, and Robin. So anyways, that's pretty much it for the video. Hopefully you better understand what Jiaoqiu does, what he brings to the table, his place in the meta and stuff like that. I just kind of wanted to argue in his favor a little bit because it felt like the entire community was trashing him. And even though I myself think he's not really worth most players' pools right now, he's definitely useful for some players that are highly invested into Acheron teams and stuff like that. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you.
私も最近疲れてるから思い切り汗を流して毒素を排出したいかも。